Greetings ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to another tank review, this time looking at the tier 8 German heavy premium tank, the Lowe. And no, don't adjust your sets, I know I've done this before, but since I did the review of this machine it has been changed somewhat by Wargaming, and so I thought it was worth doing it again. It's a tier 8 premium, it's a tank people are going to show a lot of interest in, especially as the German tech tree is one of the most well developed and one of the most popular tech trees in the game. And let's be honest, who doesn't come into World of Tanks and go, I want to drive a Tiger, what tanks can I use to train my crew? Well, I didn't, but I'm a bit special like that. So, very quickly, because I've done this in another video, historical rundown of this machine. This was essentially a super heavy tank proposal that was put forward by the Krupp company when the Wehrmacht, or when the Germans during the Second World War were looking for some really heavy armour. It was actually in direct competition with designs like the Maus and the E100, so whilst we see it here at tier 8, it wasn't actually a competitor to the Tiger II, it was a competitor to the Maus instead, and the Maus was the preferred design. So this thing never really got off the drawing board, but there we go. What we have in game here at tier 8 then is, well, like I said, it's been buffed by Wargaming. So just spoiler alert, what we have is actually a pretty decent heavy tank at tier 8. Not without its problems, but we're going to get into all that as we go. I'll talk about the gun in a bit, not going to talk about a grind because this is a premium tank, there is no grind. So we have got 1650 hit points, which is pretty good for a tier 8 heavy tank. It's not the highest in tier and class, that reward goes to the KV5, but it is pretty healthy, you can take a few hits. The hull armour, 150mm on the front, 100 on the side, 80 on the rear, turret 120, 80, 80. We will talk about those values in more detail shortly. What you need to know for now is that the hull armour is alright, if nothing special. The front of the turret is very good. That's where most of your armour really is. And that's the bit you want to expose in order to shoot people, so that works out pretty nicely. Mobility is one of the downsides of the Lowe. It is a tank that weighs 91 tons at the end of the day. So that 1000 horsepower engine doesn't actually go that far, it gives it a specific power of just over 11 horsepower per ton. Combine that with things like the ground resistances, the traverse speeds, etc., and this tank is quite sluggish. It says 35 km/h top speed going forwards, but you really need some good terrain to actually see that. Most of the time you're probably not going to be doing that. 15 km/h going backwards, it's fine, whatever. This tank is a bit on the sluggish side though. Now if you are doing a bit of ridgeline fighting, hill fighting, that engine power is enough to make that work, but not really any more than that. You're not going to be winning any speed contests in the Lowe. Concealment, who cares? Spotting, this thing has a 400 meter base view range. That's up there with the T-32 and the Carnarvon. So this machine definitely can spot for itself. And with my setup, and I am not using coated optics or a food consumable, though I do have a pretty decent crew, with my setup here I've got a 423 meter view range, so there is that. Signal range 750 meters, but honestly, sorry, 710 meters, my apologies, but who cares what the signal range is? It's enough. That's all you need to worry about. So let's have a look at this gun. Right. 105mm gun with a 5 round per minute rate of fire. Oh dear, that's without any further equipment. That is a shot every 12 seconds. With a 105 at tier 8. That's looking a bit dicey. 234 average penetration is very good, and if you're willing to fire some premium rounds, or if you need to, that penetration jumps up to 294, which is obscenely good. So penetration is not a problem. Penetration of your high explosive rounds, 60, which is pretty decent. Alpha damage of 320. Here when we start getting the problem. 320 alpha damage is not bad for a tier 8 medium tank. It's not good, it's pretty much average. But combine it with that dastardly rate of fire, and you have a very low DPM. In fact, it is the same DPM as you get on the American T-34, but the T-34 hits for 400. Let's see if I can find a tier 8 heavy tank with the same alpha damage to compare this to, just for the sake of argument. Let's have a look at the 110. Now this is a very different gun. 20% better DPM. 5 rounds a minute for the Lowe, 6 rounds a minute for the 110. Yeah, the DPM on this tank is just flat out bad. However, it does have 0.33 dispersion, which is pretty good. That's good accuracy. And in practice, what it means is that the good accuracy and the good penetration, even with the standard rounds, allow you to connect most of your shots pretty reliably. So whilst you have quite low base DPM to start off with, you don't tend to lose that much from shots bouncing or not going where you've aimed them and things like that. 2.9 second aim time for a heavy tank is kind of average. It's nothing particularly special. It's not something to get too excited about or otherwise. So the gun is reasonable. It has its advantages, it has its disadvantages. The gun's fairly decent. Yeah, it's okay. So what about crew skills and equipment and all of that jazz? Oh, and one other thing I should mention about the gun before we go any further. Wargaming buffed the gun depression on this tank to go from 8 degrees to 10 degrees. Combined with the really good turret front makes this tank an excellent ridgeline warrior. Use that 10 degrees of gun depression, poke your turret up over a ridge, shoot someone, giggle when they bounce off you, roll back, 11 seconds later do the same thing. You get the idea, rinse and repeat. Really, really nice to have. And that is really the play style of the Lowe. Use your hull armor if you have to, angle it when you are, but most of the time that turret front is what you really want to be showing to the bad guys. So, equipment, crew skills and all of that stuff. I have your standard set of consumables. You could probably throw chocolate at the tank if you really wanted to. I haven't noticed any massive fire-related problems, but it is worth bearing out the entire back of this tank is made of engine and fuel tank and other unpleasant things. Also at this point I will mention that your ammo racks are in the sides of the hull under the turret on each side, and also towards the rear of the turret on the right hand side there is another ammo rack. So you definitely want a repair kit and a med pack, and I've just got the small versions here. Ammunition. This tank carries a lot of ammo, 80 rounds. You are never going to burn through all those. So feel free to spread your ammo around a little bit if you wish to. I have 5 rounds of APCR, and after how many battles have I played in this tank? After 228 battles, I have never fired a single shot of it. Never once have I had to use that. So, yeah. High explosive, I've got 5 rounds of high explosive. They are useful for taking out things like Borsigs and whatnot, but with the relatively long reload on this gun, if you're in doubt about what your next target's going to be, you probably don't want to bother with HE. And then I've got 75 rounds of armor piercing, which is your primary ammunition. And this is a premium tank. It's going to print credits for you, massive credit multiplier. So, yeah, AP rounds, generally speaking, are the way to go. Equipment, nothing too surprising here. Gun rammer, vents, vertical stabilizer. You could swap out the vents for optics, I guess, if you wanted to, for that increased view range. Personally, I prefer the more well-rounded small buff to everything that you get from improved vents on this particular tank. Just increases your accuracy slightly, increases your everything. Enhanced gun lane drive you could go with, but you probably don't want to bother, to be honest. Vertical stabilizer does the job better, and I can't think of any of the other equipment that you'd actually even want to consider putting on. Okay, so worth noting, because this tank is so heavy, it can mount a super heavy spall liner. So increased armor protection from ramming and explosives, increased protection from crew injuries, and minus 10% stun duration. You could go with that. I wouldn't bother personally, but it's an option, I suppose. Worth pointing out that you do get the super heavy version on this tank. Crew skills, it's really going to be whatever crew, German heavy tank crew you already have. It's a premium tank, so you can transfer crews from another tank straight into this without retraining and receive no penalty. But things like repairs, brothers in arms, snapshots, smooth ride, safe stowage, all the usual good stuff, they are what you want. Nothing really too surprising there. With all that said and done, I don't really think there's anything else to discuss at the moment in the garage, so we'll go and take a look at the armor profile of this machine, some gameplay, and finish things off in the garage again. Okay then, so the armor from the rear, nothing too ridiculously interesting. This little patch here, you can see it on the model as kind of a little, there we go, this little hatch at the back. does have a different armor value. It is 95mm of armor compared to the 80 next to it, but honestly the differences in angling mean that it's, to all intents and purposes, the same, so I wouldn't get too excited about that. So rear of the turret is around about the 95mm of armor mark, rear of the hull is about 100. It's enough to shrug off most HE rounds, but light tanks in your rear are still going to do damage and all that. Side armor, effectively about 100. Side of the turret, 81 toward the rear, 125 toward the sides. It's not, I mean, you don't want to go side on in front of people, but you can angle this and get some reasonable values on it. This is not an auto bounce angle, that's just like about 180mm of effective armor. In fact, we can probably angle it a bit more like that, and we're getting around 200mm, 220, and similar on the frontal plate. So angling the Lowe like that is probably around about effective, optimally effective. Front of the hull, lower front plate is 120. With that angling, you're looking at effective armor of around about the 140, 150 mark. Upper front plate around about 210, 220. Like I said, angle it something like this, and you can get around about 220, 230mm of armor on the upper front plate and the side of the tank. One thing to bear in mind, if you are doing that, if we just switch back to the visual model for a moment, because of the large turret, there is this slightly rounded section on the side here. And if we just go back to the armor, you can see that. So we angle like this, front plate 230-ish, side of the hull about 230. But that section, because it's rounded and it's not at the same angle, if you can put a shot there, it's only about 180. So bear that in mind if you're shooting at a Lowe. Turret front, however, is a whole can of nope. Cupola, okay, strictly speaking, if you can get a good, solid, flat hit on the cupola, you can get about, well, maybe 85mm of armor on that cupola, but look at the size of it. It is tiny. A little bit of gun depression and you can't even shoot it. Turret front, well, these cheeks. Effective armor, 216. It's about 120mm of armor itself, but the effective armor, well, I mean, just look at those numbers. Lots, lots, and lots. Just under the gun mantlet, you can get regions that are about 175, so that is, I guess, the weak point of the turret. But really, you do not want to be shooting at the turret of a Lowe, if we're going to be brutally honest. Yeah, I don't recommend it at all. So let's go and have a look at some gameplay. Here we go then with our first replay. Tier 8 match, as usual. And we're going to see what we can do. We're on the Overlord map, so this is the... well, I was going to say it's one of the more recently introduced maps, but it's been in the game a little while now. But this is the map that is supposed to represent the beaches at Normandy, or at least one of the beaches in particular. Wargaming decided that you were going to play across this map, though, rather than from the beach to the land and vice versa, because, well, that might have been a bit unfair. The two spawns would have been rather different. Can you imagine having to fight your way up off that beach? Anyway, we're here for the Lowe. I was just waffling on because this thing takes a little while to trundle into position. So, top tier. Who is it that we have to worry about on the enemy team? Well, obviously, they've got a defender, they've got an IS-3. Both of those are dangerous tanks. They also have a Lowe. Borsigs and ISUs can always catch you out and be a nuisance. And straight away here, we are seeing one of the nice things that they changed about the Lowe. Gun depression went from 8 degrees to 10, so we can comfortably poke over those ridge lines, only really exposing our turret. Something that T-37 is probably not very grateful for, right at this very moment. Slightly low damage roll at 291. This is, of course, 320 average alpha damage, and we've only just reloaded. Off the top of my head, I believe the reload is well over 10 seconds. Which does, as I said in the garage, make the DPM on the Lowe kind of uninspiring. But with good accuracy and good penetration, the effective DPM, if you will, isn't too bad, i.e. you're not going to have too many shots, generally speaking, that are wasted. So while the base DPM might be fairly low, generally speaking, it's not too hard to connect those shots and be doing damage. Just bear in mind, if you find yourself in an awkward situation, you don't have the alpha damage, and you don't have the DPM, to scare or fight your way out of trouble. Hello, Mr. VK. 339 into him. Slightly high damage roll. Fair enough. Oh, and he is dead. And we pick up a little bit of assistance damage into the bargain, which is always very nice. Scoreline is 2-0. Our team is currently winning this. 3-0, never mind, as that T-37 finally hits the dust. So the enemy team seem to have decided that what they need to do on this map is that age-old tactic of pushing the beach. Now, remember what I said earlier on about how unbalanced this map would be if one team spawned on the beach and had to push their way up, and one team spawned on the high ground and basically just had to defend it. Well, those wonderful chaps who've decided to push down the beach from the enemy team, they have turned this into exactly that situation. They are trying to push up from the beach. Because that worked out really well for the Americans on Omaha, or for any of the Allied forces on any of the beaches. That was not an easy thing to do. Of course, I only mention the Normandy beaches because this map is, well, it's of those Normandy beaches. Anyway, going over here towards these areas where they can push up from the beaches just to try and start getting some shots on them. Have a punt at a Tiger P and 10 degrees gun depression. Pew, straight through the lower front plate of that Defender. Defender is a dangerous tank, do not get me wrong, it most definitely is. But he is not in a good position. He doesn't have the gun depression to effectively use that position. He is exposing his lower front plate. Now he is managing, this is an interesting engagement, he is managing to put shots into us, of course. But we're also managing to put shots into him. That one just goes into our tracks. That shot, well, kills him. So, yeah. The Defender is a very strong tank, but it doesn't matter how strong your tank is. If the person behind the wheel is a little bit dodgy, that's not going to serve you very well. Lowe puts a shot into our tracks. We put a penetrating round into him. There's only 5 of them left at this point. Again, using that 10 degrees of gun depression, going for the lower front plate on the Lowe, letting the gun aim, there we go, and bouncing the return shots off of our turret front, and there we go, one dead Lowe. Cromwell Berlin, away in the background, you really shouldn't just be sitting there, mate, although a very uncharacteristic miss from this gun. Now granted, he's probably, what, 400 odd meters away? 450, something like that. But this gun is usually pretty reliable at hitting what you pointed at. So I'm not going to worry too much about that Cromwell for now. Instead, I'm going to go over here and deal with the T-29 and the Tiger P. Tiger P we shot earlier on, of course. And the T-29 is actually, as it turns out, on pretty low health. He takes a shot, pulls back. I can't really get a shot into him, but the T-34-1 can. That just leaves this Tiger P and the Cromwell. The irony of a Tiger P trying to push the beaches on Normandy. Anyway, shot there through the turret roof of the Tiger P, and then we turn around, see if we can go and deal with the Cromwell Berlin. Only got 7 hit points remaining. Nah, someone else picks him up, and that was the match. Nothing too spectacular, but some just solid, typical Lowe style gameplay. Use your gun depression, go hull down, try and angle your armour, and you've got quite a lot of hit points to use if it comes down to it. So let's have a look at the stats for this match. Alright then, that game was enough for second class mastery, fire for effect, 4,533 experience and 106,868 credits. It's quite good. 3,203 damage done, 1 kill, 1,007 base experience, 12 shots fired, 10 hits, 10 penetrations. Fairly reliable gun. For that damage count, we received 8 hits, 3 penned, 5 did not. Our tracks soaked a shot or 2 and our armour bounced some as well. Over 1,000 damage blocked by our armour. 5 enemy vehicles damaged, 1 of them destroyed, 319 assistance damage. In terms of profitability, it was 106,868 credits with a premium account before you take away resupply costs and all that. Repairing our vehicle wasn't too expensive despite losing a reasonable chunk of health, and just over 12,000 credits to resupply the ammunition. This 105 ammunition isn't the cheapest out there, it's about 1,000 credits per shell, but still made a profit with a premium account of 89,619 credits even with a standard account, and bear in mind, this wasn't an Ace Tanker game or anything, even with a standard account, that would have been a 54,000 credit profit, which is pretty nice, especially when you consider the match was only 5.5 minutes. So, that was a bottom tier match. Let's go and have a look at a that was a top tier match, tier 8 match. Let's go and have a look at one where we are bottom tier. Okay then, tier 10 match, and we are assaulting the Siegfried line. Now, the Lowe is actually, in my opinion, relatively well positioned to deal with those tier 10 matches. As long as you can get yourself hull down and preferably use your gun depression, your turret front is pretty sturdy even against tier 10 guns. And the gun you mount on this thing is accurate enough and has good enough penetration that if you know what you're doing and you know where your weak points are, generally speaking, you can penetrate even tier 10 tanks. Now obviously that has its limitations. If you've got a Type 5 heavy casually strolling towards you, that's going to be a bit different. But, generally speaking, you can penetrate the targets you want to. And if we actually have a look at the tanks on the enemy team, we got who's got some appreciable armor. T125 is fairly well armored, although it's not a tier 10. Sorry, the Type 4 and the VKB also have a good chunk of armor, and the VK101P has a reasonable splat of armor as well. I don't think I've ever actually dipped into the premium rounds on this tank. I have 5 of them, but I don't think I've ever had to use them. So, gonna come over here and have a quick look-see. Tiger 2? Nah. Took that shot as a snapshot, didn't really have time to properly aim it. Was hoping it would go through his side armor, but we're not rewarded. This gun really does benefit from fully aiming it rather than trying to snap shoot everything. But nonetheless, I thought it was worth a go, worth a punt. So, that's the Tiger 2, there's the T110E5, Type 4 Heavy has been spotted, T57 Heavy is over on our left hand side. It may not have particularly impressive armour, but it is quite a dangerous machine, and our T57 Heavy gets himself ammo racked by an IS-3. Hurrah! Yay! And that, by the way, in case you were wondering, was a bit of a replay bug. So, yeah. Goodbye, Mr. T57 Heavy. That is us, one tank down, and an enemy object 140, slightly concerningly, has made it into A6 and is going to be a bit of a nuisance there. However, he spends far too long aiming. His shot goes into my tracks, my shot goes into his face. Well, okay, not his face, it probably bounced on his turret, but goes into his hull. He does, however, and there you can see the difference. We have the same alpha damage, but he is able to reload before I am and put another shot into me. So I'm seeing if I'm going to be able to ambush him with one more shot, and then I want to get out of here. There we go. We bounce the shot from him. Just still moving. We bounce another shot from him, but he's able to reload before we are. Nonetheless, against a tier 10 medium tank, yeah, the Lowe is actually holding its own. And worth pointing out at this point, you might think, Chip, why are you just sitting there and holding that guy in place? Bear in mind, as it stands, he doesn't want to poke out because him and this engagement isn't going very well for him. I'm in a tier 8 tank, he's in a tier 10. At the moment, my tier 8 tank is pinning down his tier 10 medium. That seems like a pretty good deal to me. Anyway, I'm not going to stay here forever, but I will stay here long enough to put one more round into the Object 140. He does unfortunately put one into me as well. We're up to 987 damage done so far. We take another hit, we put another one into him, tracking him into the bargain. And despite his higher DPM, well, this is actually going to be close. He has the higher DPM, I have the more health, and my shot missed. So this puts me in a whole world of trouble now. Oh, and he actually leaves me on 28 health. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. And I get myself into a position I probably should have done sooner, because it means I'm actually hull down. So, there we go. I, arguably foolishly, got myself into a one-on-one engagement with a tank 2 tiers higher than me. I do not recommend that, by the way, as a thing for you to do. T57 Heavy over there, thankfully that object is dead. He manages to miss 2 shots and bounce 1 on us. Where does it look like it bounced? Yeah, gum antlet would be my best guess. But we're on 28 health now. We have to be rather careful. Scoreline is 7-4, 8-4. So our team is doing fairly well, but we do have to be quite careful here. I just thought that was an interesting engagement against an Object 140 at range, same alpha damage. The Lowe actually performed better than you might expect, though not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And Type 4, put one into the rear of his turret. And this is very bread and butter style gameplay. Use your gun depression, poke above, use your turret to bounce shots, and just put shot after shot into people who are ill-prepared to deal with you. And if they do turn around to deal with you, you do have good turret front armor, although we have to be careful against this guy. If he's packing the derp gun, we've only got 28 health to play with. So he is probably going to kill us in that case. And he's looking this way, so you know what? Nah, good thanks. I have no intention of popping up there and getting absolutely nuked by him. T-57 heavy. Oh, is he looking the other way now? Yes, he is. Oh no, he's turned. No, no, side of the turret, side of the turret, side of the turret. Come on, gun depression. There we go. Another 302 into him. Can we get another shot into the Type 4? There we are, and we managed to pick up the kill. And that was the match. So let's see how well we did overall. Here we are then, first class mastery, fire for effect, bruiser, cool-headed, and steel wall. Finished top of our team by experience. We did 2,804 damage, got 1 kill, 1,256 base experience. 12 shots fired, 10 hits, 9 penetrations for that damage count. Most of which, well, just over half of which was from relatively close range. 11 hits received, 5 penned, 6 did not. In a tier 10 match, not too bad. 1 enemy vehicle spotted, 3 damaged, 1 destroyed, 789 assistance damage. We didn't make as much of a profit that game, mainly, well, we did slightly less damage, but also we were running a standard account rather than a premium account, so that's worth bearing in mind. But it was still only, well, just under 6-minute match. It wasn't a long game, and we still made a 51,000 credit profit in a tier 10 match. So, and neither of those games were anything that spectacular. They were showing you very much kind of bread and butter style gameplay. But I think it's worth looking at them anyway, and I don't really like showing you massively spectacular games in these reviews, so that's fine. Right, let's go and jump back into the garage then and have a few concluding ideas about the tank. My impressions of the Lowe then. Well, those of you who've seen my old Lowe review probably won't be particularly surprised to learn that I like this tank. I liked it before they buffed it, I like it even more after they've buffed it. I think it's a good machine. You have enough armour to bounce people if you know what you're doing. You have a really good gun depression, which makes this very comfortable to use and makes it a really good ridgeline warrior combined with its turret front. The low DPM, okay, that can be annoying, especially combined with the very average alpha damage, but honestly, it's just the sort of tank where you chip away at your enemies gradually throughout the game, wear them down, and come out on top. When you do have a DPM disparity between yourself and your target, you can use your armor and your hit points to mitigate that to some extent. You saw that when I was in the engagement with the Object 140 in the tier 10 match. Now, in that situation, there is such a DPM disparity between the two tanks that the Object 140 would have, had I let that go on, would have killed me in the end. But I was impressed with how long I was able to hold the guy out for, really. And when you're dealing with lower tier tanks than that, yeah, your hit points and your armor will allow you to overcome some of that DPM disparity. And if you can go hull down, well, you can basically beat the stuffing out of anyone as long as they are not just slamming high caliber HE into the front of your turret. It's a good tank. It makes a shed load of money. So if you want a profitable tier 8 premium tank, and let's be honest, everyone wants a profitable tier 8 premium tank, this is a great one to go for. Great great credit multiplier, and because there's very little reason to dab into your premium ammunition, you're just using your regular rounds, despite the fact that they're not the cheapest rounds in the world. The reliable gun means that you tend not to waste much ammunition, and so you're making a good profit from that. Do I recommend it to you? Well, if you like the German heavy tanks and you have a German heavy tank crew, and you're looking, and maybe even you like that hull down style gameplay, like you like playing something like a T-29 and wish you could do that with the German tech tree, hello, Lowe, there we go. One thing to bear in mind with the Lowe, the price, 12,500 gold, is not cheap. It is one of the old school tier 8 heavy tanks, tier 8 premium heavy tanks, and so it comes with an old school tier 8 premium heavy tank price tag. That is quite expensive. If you are interested in getting this tank, I would recommend waiting until it is on discount. This tank is always in the tech tree. It's not one of these that comes around periodically. It's always sitting there. I don't think it's ever left the tech tree in all the time I've been playing the game. So it's going to be there for you. You can go and you know, pick it up. One thing I would say though is, if you're used to playing Soviet heavies, let's say, with their very good hull armor, this does not play in a similar manner. If you've managed to, and you know, so if you're looking for a premium tank, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you're looking for a premium tank, generally speaking, you should be looking for the one that matches the tech tree that you are going down. So if you play loads of Soviet tanks, why would you be looking at the Lowe to be your tier 8 premium? Go and look at something like an Object 252 or an IS-6 or an IS-3A if they bring that back out. You get the idea. You want to be looking at a tank that fits the crew you have available. If you're going down one of the German heavy lines, and of which there are kind of 2, but then it splits into 3, then I do recommend the Lowe. It is a good tank, but once again, buy it on discount, save yourself a bit of cash. There we go. Hope you guys found that review informative and or enjoyed it. If you did, by all means, feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel. And as ever, I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao, ciao.